All right. It's your boy Fish. We are back with On the Money Podcast. I got my co-host with me. I got Mr. Bethel Johnson over there. How you doing, Bethel?
Always good. Always good.
I got my other big brother over there, Harris. How you doing, Harris?
Feeling great, man.
Fly.
I mean,
My man Harris.
always
It's too early.
Fly. It's not too early, man. It's always on time to talk about Harris and his flyness. So.
Man, he got all the on the money merch.
Man. But today we got a special guest with us. I brought this special guest today to our podcast. I got my boy Xavier Egan, CEO of Capital Advisory. How you doing, Xavier? What you doing, brother?
I am well. Thanks for having me, bud.
No problem, man. So tell the folks a little bit about you, Xavier. What is it that you into these days, man?
Well, hopefully everything that helps businesses or owners, real estate or otherwise, kind of get more success and create more growth.
Okay, cool. So today, fellas, we got a good conversation that we gonna get into today, right? So we're gonna dive a little deeper. You know, I know we've been dropping a lot of nuggets and jewels in all the previous podcasts, and for those that have not been able to catch some of them, you know, you need to go back and start watching them. You know, make sure that you at least know what's going on in the conversation.
Not just the snippets.
Not just the snippets, right?
ESPN has highlight reels, guys. I'm just saying.
You don't know what you don't know, man.
Yeah. So I mean, one of the things that we said we dropped one major jewel that folks would, you know, it catches them by surprise all the time, which is, you know, startups are overrated, right?
Right.
You know, so we actually decided that we're going to dive a little deeper into that, and my man Bethel, he hinted at it before, saying, hey, we might need to bring our guy on to help us talk about why we believe startups is overrated. But
well, I said it after Harris said it.
you did?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
You know.
Well, I appreciate the cosign, however it came down.
Harris said it first. I was like, nah, I don't know. No, I'm just kidding.
But I mean, at the end of the day, that's one of the strategies that we see, especially when we're talking about shifting the paradigm of black business.
Right.
One of the things that we talk about is how startups always trying to start from scratch is an overrated strategy when you're trying to build a business. So I'm gonna throw it to my man Xavier, man. When you hear that phrase, starting a business from scratch is overrated, what does that actually mean to you, my brother? What does that mean to you?
First thing to come to mind for me is negative cash flow, right?
Mm-hmm.
And for those of you who don't know, that just means spending more money or spending money before you make money, right? Which gets you to that negative point. And in every startup situation, unless you're just in some incredible spot, that's usually how it starts. And I mean, that could be exclusive territory to just starting it yourself, or even all the way into some might even say franchises, right?
Mm-hmm.
More sophisticated startup, but still you got to spend that money before you ever get a customer in the door and 1 ounce of revenue, and that's a hard place for most people.
Mm-hmm.
What is your burn rate, right?
Right.
Oh yeah. Well, you know, I think some might say cash is king, right? But for me, I think it's really a real translation of liquidity, right? That we have to have cash that's available to us right now.
Right.
And that kind of changes the paradigm of how we live. You know, our kids don't eat that hope, you know, that vision or that strategy. You know, it don't work out that way.
Nah.
The wife definitely don't believe it the same kind of way, right? I'm just, you know, that's a whole nother topic.
Yes,
It is, man. You about to start a whole nother podcast on that, man. What you trying to do, man? Goodness.
So we're going to keep it in line here.
Please do.
I want no trouble. I love you very much, all right? So, no, it's just one of those things where people just don't think about that sheer basic momentum of why they're even at work, right? Like the reason that you're kind of stuck on that, hamster wheel of repetitive paychecks is because of that liquidity, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, every week or every month or bi-weekly or however it works for you, you know it's coming, so you feel good about that bill that's coming right behind it.
Right.
And so really that just talks to that negative cash flow. And whether we're talking about a business scenario or individual scenario of kind of where we are in personal finance, it's still kind of the same topic, right?
Mm-hmm.
That, you know, liquidity and having cash available to you is important. And that's kind of where, you know, startups versus the alternative kind of becomes, more sensible for you.
Right, right. Now, Harris, I know that you've lived in both worlds, from the startup and to the acquisition type thing. When you started your first business, just kind of describe to me, what was that process like when you was going through doing that business that you first did, or the few of them that you've done? What was it like being in that startup phase?
Man, fresh out of college, excited about getting out in the world, kind of getting my feet wet. Knowing in college, though, I really didn't want to work for anyone. Like, I've always had the entrepreneurial spirit. We spoke about it last time. Even when I'm working for someone, I'm 100% thinking about how to get out that door. Always
the secret.
Yeah,
right.
I'm always trying to get out.
Right. Even if it's even when it was a comfortable situation, something inside of me was just restless. Right. I used to say, man, I'm just sick with ambition. I have to do something different than what I'm doing. When I started a company with a relative of mine, and everyone would say, man, take it to North Dallas. You'll make money. And I was like, man, I want to do it for my people. Even then, that was my mindset. I want to provide service for my community, our people, right? And to be honest, man, I remember going downtown to the basement. I don't know if you guys are, registering
when you
your
register,
business.
you got to go down. Commerce.
I remember going through that process and really not knowing, building an airplane in the air, not really recognizing the importance of a CPA or structure, just knowing I had something inside of me. Right. It's okay to have something inside of you, but you have to have structure with it. And what happened is,
absolutely,
I bought a job.
Yeah.
Right.
My goodness.
I actually couldn't, if I was to take off, then I wasn't bringing any capital in. The only thing that was keeping me afloat was my 9 to 5.
Right.
Right. So I was, pulling double duties and doing these other things. And I realized that after my business mentor, go get you one.
Right.
Hurt my feelings and really snatch the Band-Aid off and say, hey, if you can't take off, then you just bought a job, right?
Yeah. Right.
And
Right.
a paradigm shift. Wow. You know what? I did. And at that time, I had, positioned myself to get business credit and take out some loans and do some things to kind of expand my territory. And I felt trapped. So I had to work that job and my vision for a year and a half. And I sold my book of business. And I learned a lot of things because at the end of the day, I didn't really break even, because what I realized is my business mentor, he had a very, very large home, large lot. And he said, do you mow your lawn? And I was like, no, I pay somebody. I don't have time. I'm here, I'm there. He was like, you know what? That's good, because you have to ask yourself, how much is your time worth? And I never thought about it that way, even in my personal life outside of work, working for someone else, because I recognize, as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, you don't really get off, especially when you're sole proprietor.
Right.
It's you and everything else that comes with it. You're the CEO, you HR, you're the janitor, you wear every hat, right?
Right.
And I realize now, knowing what I know about business and life, that's why purchasing an entity that has those structures and those stop gaps in place, you position yourself in a way where if you do what you know needs to get done, then you will be successful. When you're trying to figure it out and you don't have anyone to talk to or ask, historically, and I mean speaking on me personally, I wouldn't consider that a win. It was a win because I got some applicable information, knowledge, but looking at the P&L and looking at the business side of it, it was a bad move.
Right. Now, Bethel, I know that you've had a few businesses back in your time as well before you've gotten to this point. What were some of the learning points that you've experienced starting the businesses from scratch up until this point? What hit you coming up?
I learned to fail better.
What does that mean? What does that mean?
I didn't fail the same way every time. Right.
Okay.
So I learned
forward, huh?
Yeah, I learned I had like 5-6 failed businesses before I started understanding there's no shortcuts in business.
Right.
Like if you take a shortcut, because everything, like I said, you're a sole proprietor. Everything is coming out of your pocket. Everything is on you. And like to your point, negative cash flow that's an understatement when it came to these businesses. They were understatement because everything was flowing out of my personal income, my personal stuff to cover all this stuff. So for me, that wasn't a sustainable model. So every time I would start a business, I never failed the same way. I always failed better and better and better until I started understanding. I took all those failures that I was having, and it's like, you know what? If you take what you've learned from that and then just apply it to this, it could be more successful. And my number one deal was you can't cut corners in business. If you try to save costs when starting a business, you're going to pay it one way or the other.
Right.
You don't get around that cost. You're going to pay it on the front end or you're going to pay it on the back end.
I agree.
Back end is a little more expensive than the front end.
My father's dead and gone, but he used to always drop jewels on me. He would say a well-bought lesson
is a what?
Is a well-taught lesson.
Man, my mama just said that to me the other day.
Oh, that's funny. That's funny.
What were you doing wrong? You did something, didn't you?
We were just talking about some stuff from the past, and she was just like, she said a well-learned lesson is better than she said a well-bought lesson is better than a well-taught lesson. That was her thing.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Well, these are interesting viewpoints because these are
the same thing.
They're very common, right? Very, very common. In theory, 66% of business owners wear 3 or more hats in the business, right? Yeah. They're the CEO, they're the CFO, they're the chief legal officer, chief janitor, chief HR. I'm the chief, right?
Let me bring this cat up. Here we go. That boy had all 4 positions. CEO, COO, CFO, and CTO, Chief Technology Officer.
Man. Somebody's got to do it, right? Good night. So my mother told me early in entrepreneur kind of activity that she was once told that you make your side hustle until it's big enough to be your main hustle.
Amen.
And I thought that was interesting, right? But when I look back on it and thought about, to your point, time and how the constraint of that works, then I quantified, well, if I spend 8 to 5, the most popular and best hours for the other man, and I only spend the worst hours of the day for myself and for my own benefit, then how can I ever make the outcome better income than the other scenario? And so
you telling me you're not going to sleep, waking up, figuring out how you can make your boss money?
Hey, and that is literally how the system works. And so it's a lot of, if we talk just regular financial empowerment, we talk about how literacy is, something learned and innate, that we've been taught and heard things from visuals to books to, quotes that are contradictory in all subsets, right? Like Benjamin Franklin, for instance, said credit is money, but he also said time is money, right? And so these are 2 different paradigms that, depending on what you heard, when you heard, how you heard it, you may apply this against that business constraint, which could be to your detriment. So these are commonalities of that negative cash flow kind of feedback, right? That, hey, as we're trying to build things, there's a lot of great ideas, but again, that negative cash flow is a beast. Whereas that alternative of buying something that already pre-exists or has cash flow already, established business, I know most people kind of think about it from a pretty woman standpoint, like we're buying distressed things and tearing them apart.
Right.
But quite often, the same way that you don't think about why the house you're buying has something just terribly wrong with it and why that guy left it behind, as much as he just grew up to something else, right? Well, the stats are that in the next 10 years, over 5 million businesses are going to change hands. So one of the largest wealth exchanges is happening right now under our noses, where the old paradigm that, family legacy and succession is just not something true anymore. Nobody wants to do what their parents did, no matter how good it was, whether they were superstar or Michael Jackson or Billie Jean, right? They still believe they can do something else that's more beneficial to them. And now little Timmy, after he grows up, he moves away.
Right.
He doesn't even live here anymore, right? He's got his own thing. He's got his own crowd, his own life. So where can you go with this? Statistically, 75% of business owners, whether successful or not, have over 80% of their wealth accumulated in their business, right? So retirement isn't really an option if you don't even know that you're planning to exit in advance, right? It's not a real option. And so only 20% of businesses actually sell on the market holistically. So if you've got all your eggs tied up in this, proverbial basket, then you've already got a problem if you don't understand the disposition and, gaining of businesses from purchase or, sale kind of thing, right? You're a little behind. And this goes back to why sometimes our startups don't succeed as much, is because we don't understand what those value markers are to create that type of exit strategy. Right.
We don't even enter into it with that. Like,
yeah.
Now they'll tell you if you went to the center and, you know, took advantage of all that free education, or paid education, right? That, hey, at the small business center, you should create a business plan. And they say, think with the end in mind, right? That's it. So, you know, the effective habits as well. So figuring that out for most of us isn't something that we think is possible. But I think that, you know, that's just a part of the awareness that, you know, we're out here trying to build, is that, you know, you can do anything, right? It just goes back to the difference between blissful and willful ignorance, right? Blissful that we just don't know what we don't know.
Right.
But after you get on the OTM podcast, right?
Come on now.
You got some trouble now, huh? You know, you're willful now. Hey, sometimes we have fun with it. It's jolly, all right? But just trying to figure out where we have positions and opportunity and access, you know, as a part of that, you know, big paradigm that we're all searching for, right?
Yeah. Now, Xavier, I met you doing your favorite one of your favorite lead activities via LinkedIn and all that kind of stuff a few years back. But what made me was like, okay, I need to meet this dude, was like, I did not come across many business brokers that had the hue and chocolateness of you.
Come on now.
Right? So
it's like three of them, isn't it?
The other guys East Coast and the others West. Right? We split it up. You know, we divide
and conquer. Huh?
Divide and conquer, right? So one of the things I would love to know is, how did you even get exposed to this as a career field? And like what got you going into just starting as a business broker?
Well, I guess to everybody else's story, I wanted to be an entrepreneur. You know, it was always for me going to the organizations that I was working for, no matter how high I got or how low I was, the ideal was to learn everything, right? To understand it so that I can use it as a tool for myself one day. And then the idea was just, where are we going to direct that, right? At some point. And so, you know, there's a lot of excitement behind real estate, right? To say the least. So, you know, that was a phase. You know, I owned a block or something like that. But then I looked into business, seeing that, you know, we couldn't possibly work for these companies and get the real estate returns, you know what I mean? And they hire us, right? This is impossible.
Why would they?
This cap rate just don't make sense, right? And I mean, I owned a whole block. So this was something that, you know, shocked me, that wasn't a good capital constraint model, right? And so working in companies, kind of understanding a little bit more and more, I went to go buy a company as my first strategy, just trying to gain insight to mergers and acquisition, and knowing that, you know, cash flowing opportunities is a real thing. Now, I was applying a lot of bad logic back then, right? I was pretty young, not too old myself. You know, don't let the gray hair fool you.
Don't let the grays fool, huh?
Yeah, don't let that fool you. But as
he might be the youngest one up here.
No, you know.
Don't tell him. Don't tell him.
Baby Fisher over there. Fisher, you older than?
He wants to hope.
Than Xavier?
No, I'm not older than Xavier.
Oh man, I think.
Oh my goodness, really?
He got held back, something like that. No. So no, it was one of those discovery methodologies, right? Like everybody else, you know, hypothesis testing, you know, trying to understand, trying to participate to figure out what's going to be the right angle. And so when I went after buying a business, it was hard. Right. It was limited people that were available to assist me. It was, you know, just kind of book knowledge, which didn't seem to translate very well to the reality of kind of the atmosphere and who the gatekeepers were of real facts and figures.
That's not in the books.
So, yeah, it wasn't in the books, right?
You're not learning this at school.
So this first company worked well. You know, I worked out a good transaction or deal for me where, you know, I'm in my early 20s and it's making maybe 30, 40,000 a month, but people are stealing from me, right? Like I'm young, I don't know enough about business. It wasn't structured already. It was something that I had to come in and rebuild to get to where I was going. The market changed, I moved to something else. And so I took some more time in corporate trying to redeliberate on, you know, what's the move, man? You know, like, can I be successful here? Is it just the 6 figures or what is it? And so as my second shake, I just went for more knowledge. And as I was looking for businesses this time, you know, I found better resources, you know, time had passed, technology had become greater, you know, all of these things, which are real facts and figures, especially for us who have sometimes limitations to access points. Technology is one of our greatest tools these days. So I found an opportunity to actually buy a brokerage instead of building. And so the amount of knowledge and subset that I was able to gain up front and the tools, the marketing engines, and the perpetual ways and methodologies were something that allowed me to enter the game and enter the market in a successful capacity where I was able to do something that, granted, I questioned just like everybody else, would they give me access? Would they let me in? Would they see me? Would they speak to me? And just having the right mechanisms around the business, that right process and structure that was something that was built, as a bigger system, allowed me to be able to, forego, that natural, downside they would say we had, right? Or limitations.
Something that we discussed a couple of times about the crumbs, right? And I know you and I have conversations all the time, and I want the people to kind of realize and understand that it's not just our perspective. A lot of professionals don't even realize what the crumbs are.
Right.
And I remember a conversation I want you to kind of speak on where you were in an environment and you were doing some things and being successful, and then you realize, man, they are really only giving me this amount. And I'm actually the linchpin in the conversation and the deal, but this is what you feel like I deserve and what I'm worth.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, just, I was in the finance and accounting world in corporate America. So I had the opportunity to go, pretty decent place kind of in the hierarchy. And so as I was doing it, I'm taking over, all these positions and all these tasks. I literally took over the worst team in the company at one point, like literally the worst. Like, it's so bad they are losing $100 million, and your job is to make sure it's not 101. 101's gone. That's go time. You're out of here.
Right.
Wow.
So this is a hard kind of place, and I took over different management positions, 3 different departments, kind of tried to build it all up, all off the carrot that there was some success or something to come next from this transaction. And it even got to the position where I was able to help negotiate this big transaction for the company where they no longer had a loss, right? They were able to make up this money that they were losing over 5 years and $100 million, like in a 1-2 year period, based off an idea that I brought to the table. And what's even worse is that when I brought the idea to the table, they told me it was a bad idea.
Of course. That's usually how it goes. Because their idea, it's a bad idea.
It was a bad idea. Right. And literally, these were all people higher than me in title and presence and position and, length and tenure. And so, they said, oh, no, that's a bad idea. There's no way they're going to do that. And I stated my case, hey, well, if the opportunity comes, can I take it, right?
Come on.
Because that's what we all looking for in life. Right. And so they said, well, hey, if you think it's, worth a shot, it comes available, shoot your shot, right? As Jordan would say, you gotta put those in the air, right?
Right.
So,
right.
So we're in the middle of the meeting. It's going decently, but it's going to some hard spots, and it's not going the way we look like we want, right? And not getting this done. I mean, the entire, it's maybe a couple $1 billion organization. So this is all the way up to the C-suite of people, calling in,
right.
Like what's happening, where you at, what's your plan, how's it gonna move. And so we got to this point where it seemed like a hard, stop. And I felt that this was the opportunity to shoot the shot. And so I mentioned what my idea was. And literally the entire room looked at each other and said, you know what? I think that's a good idea. Why not? Right. And they proceeded to take the highest few of those other guys in the room because I was the only me there.
Right.
And you can say that on this show.
Hey, I just work here, buddy. And they took this to a private conversation in the next room to go resolve. Excluded.
Oh,
yeah.
Private conversation.
My idea. I presented it in the middle of the meeting. It didn't come from any other angle in the room, and they took this up
let's
to
take
another
a break
room.
Real quick, guys. We'll be right back.
Yeah, that's it. Right after these messages, we'll come back. And they literally came out the room. We're like, winking the gun type of move. We're there, guys, and we literally packed up and left. And before we even got back to the hotel, they had already sent the praise reports for themselves.
Oh, yeah.
All the way to the top of the organization, back to the bottom. I was receiving emails about the success of the team, not specifically about what I had done, and it literally turned into nothing for me, right? And so it just goes back to seeing, the these level of transactions in so many ways kind of pass through, your hands or participation. And for an accountant, it's even worse because we've got direct insight into the numbers, the fact pattern. It's not like, hey, I'm an operational guy and I just believe what's happening. I believe he's getting paid more. No. I know he's getting quadruple, right? I know it's happening. I've seen his bonuses. I've seen the deals that go on every day. And so it's one of those things where everybody naturally is pushed towards that entrepreneur spirit from feeling that, breakdown. But the question is that the right strategy, how to go about it, right?
Right.
And what I've learned is just there's so many tools. I would think if I knew what I knew today, I wouldn't even be doing what I'm doing now, right? There's a tool called a ROBS, and most people haven't heard of it. Bad acronym. I don't know why they would have thought of something like that. For retirement tool, a rob. They're going to rob you. I don't think that's where we're going to go today.
They are going to rob you.
They might.
We talked about it on the last show.
Well.
Go ahead.
We went there.
Right? That's exactly why
they're going to rob you.
But
it's in front of your face.
Right.
This is another tool that gives you self-power versus people power over you and your assets. Yeah. So in a ROBS, it's called a rollover business startup plan, right?
Okay.
And what it allows you to do is move a portion of all of your retirement, however you feel, which unfortunately is only unleashed after they unleash the Kraken of firing you.
Yes.
We'll talk about that at another time.
Right.
But in order to use that 401k or whatever that retirement is, you can transfer over this tax-free into this entity that's all owned by your retirement and you, and you have free will of that cash flow to start, create, or build, or lend, or fund against. So a lot of executives have used this historically. You wonder how that guy got fired when they cut the bait and the fat, and he came back the next week with a whole organization ready to go and to play with you guys on the other side and get paid. Well, they've used these types of tools to unleash the money for themselves, to apply for themselves. And now as you're building your empire, you're fueling your own retirement and future while at the same time paying a salary to yourself in the organization, running it as the CEO. Well, why isn't this something that's widespread? I mean, everybody knows about a self-directed, with all the limitations.
And I've been in finance for 8 years, and I just now heard
that's the thing, right?
About a Rob, and even in the retirement space, they don't even preach that. That's not in any of the literature.
Absolutely not.
No. Any of the study material. It's not in any of that.
That is against the protocol because it doesn't help them control the money, right? And we're on the Money podcast. I think this is relevant, right? The whole idea of what you talked about before of why we think they may be robbing us in the normal scenario is because they're controlling that money and acquiring those fees from us. They might not be going after the best strategy to really maximize what we're looking for, which is extreme wealth. Yeah, I mean, that's not what their job is, right? So as I talked to a group recently, he said it's like you're telling me it's like asking a dog to be a bird, right? Well, the dog is just going to do what the dog's going to do, and you want me to fly off and create wealth for you. That's not his job. His job is to keep you in a certain position of consistency, and that doesn't put you in a position of, grandeur, of this self-acclaimed activity that you're looking for. So it's really just that there's so many tools, there's so much knowledge to be gained. That blissful versus willful ignorance, that's a real thing.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. So there's a lot to that, lot of nuggets that just got dropped there. And one of the things that I think that people need to understand is when they're watching and seeing that somebody used their life savings, if you will, to go out and now they either bought a franchise, bought a real estate bought some real estate, commercial real estate, or bought a business in this case. That's exactly what Xavier's referring to, where sometimes people could say, oh yeah, we used our life savings. Sometimes it ain't just life savings that's sitting in the savings
account,
right? Like, so it's a big difference in knowing how they're actually going out there and making these different types of acquisitions. These same things, same tools that what he's talking about is the same thing that you can go out and purchase and get, whether it is a business or some real estate or something. At the end of the day, it's about purchasing cash flow.
Absolutely.
Cash flow. That's what it's about.
It's just that there aren't many investment or asset classes that come as direct in that, right?
Right.
There's some maybe we could talk some oil and gas deals or some of those, recurring, maybe some note-based deals.
See, now you about to go over folks' heads right there with the oil and gas. Now, and the only reason why I say that is, and you're not really going. So
we get it.
We get it. And so, and the only reason why I say that is we had a situation where somebody said. And that we were going
calling them out on this show.
Yeah, said that we was going over people's heads, and quite frankly, I don't believe
that event.
I don't believe.
I didn't prescribe to that message. Okay? I vouched for him this one time. All right,
but
event.
But I only want
servants of all.
Don't try to cut me off. It was Juneteenth.
Hold on, man. Let me go ahead and get it out.
Somebody from the community, not even from the community. I thought it was a bad idea to have this person hosting us any part of it anyway.
I'm always happy to host if you need that, guys.
But I'm saying they thought it was a good idea to have somebody outside of the community to host our stuff, and I just felt like it wasn't a good look anyway.
Well, it probably started with him being late.
Juneteenth.
Yeah, probably started with him being late.
Right,
but
it did. It did.
Very late.
But the reason why I put a pin
30
into
minutes.
It was 30 minutes.
But okay. Well, I digress. Go ahead.
But the reason why I put a pin in that part, as far as you talking about the oil gas deal, is I just want people to understand how broad or how big they really can go to these different types of deals, because to your point earlier about the side hustle, too many times we're thinking our starting point is in the side hustle position,
correct,
when that's not where we need to be.
Or
go ahead.
Or we're saying I don't have the capital, and he just relayed to you.
Another
you probably
strategy.
do.
Yeah,
it's just not in the form you think of.
Right.
Access.
Exactly. So that's the only reason why I was like, oh, you're going up. But go ahead, talk about some of the some other things as related to the different asset classes.
Well, just the idea that immediate cash flow, right? That in the simplest transaction in a merger and acquisition deal, say we're talking a dry cleaner, right? Something everybody can understand. Well, nowadays the way that payment processing works with most people, cash isn't king, right? So we're probably 95% credit card in a scenario like that, right? So say we get to the closing table. Today it's Mr. John's business. We've just closed, transaction done. Tomorrow, it's Joey's business, right?
Right.
Well, part of that is as simple as contracts changing hands to where now when they come into work tomorrow, that every time they swipe a credit card, instead of going to Mr. John's business, it's coming straight to Joey's business.
And let me
just
stop
his
right.
pocket.
Let me
straight to his pocket.
I know where you're going, bro.
Let me just stop right there.
Go ahead.
That's a very, 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 very important thing not to miss.
Oh, yeah.
And this is what happens sometimes. And I'm going to be transparent. I purchased, a couple of entities in my lifetime that did extremely well.
It was more than a couple, guys. It was more than a couple.
They did extremely well. And one of the miscues was in that transition.
Oh, yeah.
And not realizing that there's no window in that transition.
Well, you need good representation sometimes, right?
Right.
Good support there, right?
You do.
But in that grander scheme, something is interchanging that fast to where, yesterday he was the guy with the bank account, and today I'm the guy with the bank account. Right. That's a big deal, right?
It is.
That's not me
running
uphill and trying to go be George Jefferson. That's me walking in as George, right?
Exactly.
I skip the line, it's almost like a shortcut, right? Yeah. Or a cheat code to the business transaction. And as I said, if I would have known what I know today, I would have just, worked hard, went to college, worked those couple years with a good pay, matching that 401k, and I would have used this ROBS to buy any type of company that I thought was fit, started with that 100,000 plus salary, and then I might have done anything I wanted. I might have volunteered more, or help people more, or just created more businesses, or maybe that great idea that I had, I could have added or tagged along because I've got sustainable cash flow taking care of me.
So I don't want folks to miss that. Like for those that are listening, he really just mapped out a clear-cut exit strategy for you. If you're sitting there like, man, I'm trying to figure out my next business. I got something on the side that I got going on. It's not bringing in the cash that I want. It's negative cash flow right now, right? But actually, I got a 401k or some type of retirement account that's sitting over here that we talked about in the last episode of what's going on with that thing, right?
Losing money.
So
daily.
if you allow them to have all the control with it, you losing out, right? So now you got a scenario to where you can take that 401k based off of his strategy, what he talked about, and then roll it over to go, instead of starting something from scratch, become a partner with your 401k, and now you have control.
Team with yourself,
team with yourself at that point, right? So now you have control of your future, and then moving on from there and go and being able to purchase cash flow versus creating a job for yourself.
Listen, I've never heard of a Rob. Right. I'm just telling you.
I'm gonna make sure I put it up.
I've been in this business for a while, and I'll
happily put you in contact with my guy.
I've studied for this. I have the 7, 63, 66. I studied the 66, the 65. I did all the financial license that you can look into, and that was not mentioned in any of the material that I've ever went through. And I went through every page of those books. Well, every single page.
I don't even think we're done yet here. So I'm sure
not
there's
even
more
close
to get to. So what I would like to even roll that into is, maybe we skipped over some of the details, right? We just talked about the good side, and people are still saying, well, hey, what's the gap there? How do I really get this accomplished? How much money do I need? What am I really getting out of it, right? All that kind of jazz. So let's just, I always have a good, easy example. Hopefully we can follow this math, right? But I always use 100,000 as a good example, right? Mm-hmm. Just saying that most people, if you're in the right position, making a decent amount of money, you can match that 401k, and you could probably accomplish that in 5 years, easy. Just saying on the match side on your 401k while still living your life,
but
not affecting yourself.
Point, you're vested.
Well, yes, right, which will give you access to being able to move on, right?
Right, but most people are not being vested now. They're getting out of business. They're leaving jobs
leaving
way before
point,
they get
right?
invested. Yeah.
Now, absolutely. This goes back to why I'm trying to line out that, hey, if you ain't got it, then 5 years might be your target, right?
Yeah.
Because this is something that can be accomplished for anybody at a certain wage and above, right? Just based on natural, matching strategies. So that's why I say, hey, 100K isn't something, just too far-fetched, right? Everybody feel comfortable with that?
Right.
All right. So the way that business acquisition works is just like real estate from the natural standpoint. It is a leverage game. And so people aren't really thinking about business acquisition from that standpoint. They're thinking about how they start companies, and every freaking last dime, every scratch and claw came out of my pocket to make this exist. Well, on this side, you think of it like a real estate deal, except for, we'll talk about the highlights of why it might be better, right? So you're going to leverage in this deal, probably average industry is 10 to 30%. 30% would probably be you buying into the deal. You're not ready yet, right? Mm-hmm. Probably the industry standard, the SBA low end, right? Which we generally take the government loans as our lower end side, right? When we're talking real estate, we'd be talking FHA or veteran, right? Versus having to do conventional where we got to put more cash in. So SBA minimum standard is 10%, right? And so say if you had to go a little higher, 20% might be your max, right? Mm-hmm. So just to use that with our 100,000, right? What does that leverage capacity mean for us, right? Well, that's 10% of $1 million company valuation wise that I can purchase, or 20% of a $500,000 company.
Right.
Well, all right, we talked the leverage, right? 10 or 20% down. That's what we need. All right, well, what does that mean for us? What's the difference between a $500,000 and $1 million company? Well, there may be some variations, slight deviations to what that makeup might be. But what we would start is at that cash flow, right? The most important part. And we're not talking about accounting cash flow, right? We're not talking about just that accounting stuff, that EBITDA. We're talking about discretionary seller earnings, right? And so that's a little bit different. That starts with the EBITDA, but then it also adds in other discretionary expenses that, say, the owner is taking these fringe benefits that he could ultimately choose.
In the business,
He could ultimately choose whether he does that because it doesn't make him revenue, or he just takes that cash home. That might be a cool car, cool house, cool apartment, good benefits, good salary, whatever the case may be. So there's a little bit difference to this. This isn't like accounting, hey, the net sum of every activity in the business, cash inflows and outflows. It's actually more specific to what cash is available for me as the owner to enjoy. Right.
So you mean you're not doing any of them Shark Tank made up valuations, man?
No, this is different. That's more the VC side of things, where we're in the most, I guess, the hardest press kind of business. It's the highest returns, but it's also the riskiest form of transactions,
right?
Which is why it works a lot differently, right? We're talking about the safest form, the #1 growth strategy globally for all organizations is to just acquire another organization that's already doing good,
right?
And just my belief is I can help them do great.
Right.
And just that simple difference.
Now, I don't want folks to miss that big point that you made there and gloss over it, because at the end of the day, what this is all about is managing risk.
Oh, yeah.
Managing risk, right?
Absolutely.
And so what we're talking about, the reason why we're saying starting a business from scratch is overrated is because of the risk that it comes along with it. And so now you're talking about acquiring something that now diminishes the amount of risk that you're getting into while also increasing the amount of earning potential and because of the liquidity that you've been going back and talking about earlier before. So yeah,
absolutely, right. And so that's why I'm trying to make sure to pause for the cause about cash flow, right? Because obviously what we might have learned in the book version of that is going to be different than what we're talking about right now, right? Which is something quite different, right?
Real life works a lot different than the books.
OJT, man, on the job training is where you get it all. Right?
Yes.
I'll tell you a story about that one day.
Come on.
The idea that we can take advantage of that transaction. Well, hey, $1 million organization. If we started with that cash flow, right, what we were describing, could be somewhere in between 200 to 300,000 in cash flow that I have under my control. Right. And that's not saying that the business doesn't make 1, 2, 5, 10 million in revenue, right? But that how much I have available to access for me and to pay my debt, right? If we were, plus there might be assets plus or minus to kind of get up to that number. And then if we were talking about $500,000, maybe we're looking at something around 100, 150 to 200,000 in owner's cash flow or discretionary income that I'm under control of or have access to. Now, one of the points that I always like to stop at is if you think about those numbers and translate to what I just said as investment, what other deal can you turn 100,000 into multiple hundreds of thousands available back to you every year?
No, we'll wait to find out that answer.
I'm still looking. There's some things out there, but nothing works like business.
Forex cash program don't work.
Well, I'll tell you
Forex,
the straightforward is that in each of those types of investments, you have to lock in your money for a period to unlock your returns, right? And those returns may be unforeseen and never yielded, right? So this is different. You're ultimately buying something that's strategically had history of 3 to unlimited years, right? Yeah. Like at minimum for the bank to finance it, it has to be older than 3 years, right? To be out of the startup phase. Statistically, outside of the first 3 years, we got more of a 60% chance of living life, right, as a business. So it's the bank trying to take that risk away as well. So the bank criteria for me to own or get involved in this deal is number one, I have this down payment amount for the deal that I'm looking for. But for the bank to be interested, their 2 criteria are straightforward. The deal, number one, has to have enough cash flow to pay for itself.
Right.
It takes care of me as the bank.
Why? Why is that? Why is that? Because the banks don't take any risk.
There are no L's. There are no L's for the banks. They don't take risks. That's not a thing.
You learn that in Monopoly.
So yeah, bank always wins.
Banks always win.
So the number one is that the deal has to make enough money to pay the debt. The number 2 is that this same deal has to make enough money to pay me, right? And that's the bank's criteria. That sounds more like a friend, right, than a transaction or investment transaction that normally we would do. And then when we talk about, well, hey, you're talking about this debt and leverage. Well, maybe I can't get access to that. Credit criteria, yada, yada, yada. Dude, the lowest bank that's on the roster will take a 640 credit score in order to unleash this type of transaction as long as you have the capital.
Right.
There are lease vehicles that people are out there stunting on right now that required more of them. Than it took to create cash flow that consistently and creates a going concern for them each and every year. And so it's just a different opportunity. I think that people don't realize just because it's shown from a a large subset, on TV, WhatsApp and Facebook kind of thing, or Apollo Group taking over the Sands and the Venetian and things like that. But there's no media for Papa Joe transferring his wealth to me. There is no article about that. That's just happening, right? And so people just don't realize that there's a level for all of us, right? We don't have to be at 10, 20, or $2 billion to make this transaction happen. That could just be that basic start that we talked about, 50 or 100,000 to go after what we're doing, or build up till we have it, right? Leverage. Because one of the flaws that people have had is that they'll take this same knowledge and believe that they can shortcut it. And instead of buying a business that's valuable enough that the bank would fund, that they'll buy what they can afford out of their pockets. Right. And that's night and day from what we're talking about. Established, historic entities that have relationships, have customer bases, have employees, have the structure and everything already together. And all I'm applying is my body, right? So what I tell people, my buyers from the rep side, is we got 3 commandments when we buy businesses. Number 1, don't mess it up.
Don't mess it up.
It already worked before you got there. You bought something that was good. Yeah. Don't mess it up. And we might have to speak some French on them.
Which means that you need to have a strong self-awareness of who you are as a person.
Absolutely.
Because you can allow pride to get in the way.
I'll tell that money
and say, you know what?
A song called "Pride is the Devil."
Yeah,
pride is the devil.
And J. Cole did me.
Yeah, pride is the devil.
Hey, that's a thing, right?
It is a thing.
So that's self-assessment, right? Or being aware of, hey, what types of relationships work best for me, or what do I feel like I can fit in, or who
just
can
go back and watch that episode.
Like that.
Who Are You? We can get into that.
Yeah, hey, they did it, man.
Yeah.
Tune in. Number 2, shut up and learn what they're doing. Right? Too many times.
That is super important.
Too many times, right?
Shut up and learn. It's okay.
OJT,
it's okay.
People don't realize on-the-job training is how we build everything, right? We went to school, in all types of schools and all types of education between this round table right here. And how many of you could say you learned everything to get you here from that classroom, right? Most of it happened by getting in the face of that job where you thought you had the experience in sink or swim, or, maybe a little leverage, or maybe a little mentorship. But either way, you had to learn it there. And so the same thing applies here, right? It doesn't matter what type of business, no matter how simple or sophisticated, right? Every business is unique. 2 gas stations across the street from each other are totally different. Why? Because one guy pays his salary a certain way. One guy buys a certain product. One guy prices it a certain way, right? One guy opens a certain day and the other guy doesn't. So same business, but 2 unique models of how it applies. So you still have to know, even if you're the gas man or the gas king man or the gas king man or the gas king, how this business works.
Right.
And so not messing it up, number 1, is important, right? It's a simple rule, right? Hard to follow sometimes. Learning, shut up and listen to what's happening so you can learn. Number 2, OJT, you want to understand. And number 3, if you've done these 2 things up front, you've set back, let what's happening happen, didn't break it, you've learned what's happening, then you can actually apply now why you're the Steve Jobs in this bitch. Right. You're bringing in, your resources, your utility, you're bringing your expertise, you're trying to nip at where the places of growth are, right? The natural subset is this market that's interchanging hands is, ownership market of 60% baby boomers who own 60% of the private market, right? So these guys are between 60 and 80, right? There's some natural things they're not doing, right?
Right. So there's some easy growth potential within there because
naturally
they've been set in their ways of how they've been doing things, and there's a lot of turnover things to grow the business.
The largest wealth transfer, and we have these skills, right? We're the most educated, most in tune with tools society that's ever lived so far, right? And there's a on the mountaintop speech by MLK, a good frat brother of someone's, that talks, the historic context that even back then in 64, 63, when he did the speech that, he'd rather be in no place, not with Aristotle or Plato or, with Napoleon than right there and then because of what they had and where they were in society. And you can't tell me that we aren't 5 times the position now, right? Where Back to the Future was a movie
Right.
And now we're literally living it. You know, this experience in itself, you know, they have a visual of us talking on a tube, you know, that we created is a version of that. So there's so much opportunity. I think that, you know, what they told me at University of Chicago is my creativity was problem solving. And that I just believe there's a solution for every problem. Right now, some are more complicated to get to, you know, and some are maybe not as apparent, but we're not limited, right? There's so much opportunity. There's so many choices, and really just getting the access to them,
man,
understanding.
So one of the things that I think that's important for what you said as far as those 3 steps, I think one of the reasons why it's hard to follow steps 1 and 2 is because we're so conditioned to just get in and go. And we're used to being in the employee or the self-employed spot, but it's a different mindset to be in the business owner or investor spot, right?
Those two
Absolutely.
are completely different.
It's completely different, right? So it's really a huge shift. And then when it comes time to leverage the expertise that you've had time to sit back, evaluate, analyze, and say, okay, I can make a couple of these key changes here and here, but I'm still making sure that I'm taking in my cash flow of what it is.
It allows you to avoid making an emotional decision, right?
Right.
Oh, yeah.
That problem that was $100,000, if not done correctly, can be $1 million.
Right.
So I think there's a great brother VC in South Africa that says, paraphrasing, you know, there's something to be earned and learned in growth.
Yeah.
Right. And that you can't gain it without being in that position.
Don't tell me you bringing up my boy Vusi again.
That's right. That's right. That happened. That just happened. You're gonna give his thing credit on your thing? No?
I give credit to where credit's due. I'm shout out Vusi.
Giving credit.
Yeah, I give Vusi credit.
So good translation though. And so what people don't realize, because of part of what Fish is saying, is that they've got such a mentality of being in these other places and positions. So without having the chance to be in this spot or be in this seat, they really don't know what to do, which is why it's important to sit back and, you know, earn and learn that position, right? One of the things that we don't realize is most startups don't get to the place because of the stress on cash flow to even have leadership or positions or people to support. So we're still coming from a place, if we've been in business, to where it's me, and I'm ready to run these 16 hats. So it's a different space, right? Everybody knows that you want to be a manager until you're the manager, right?
Listen.
And then once you're the manager, you realize that that's a different job, right? Like you got a different weight, you know, different responsibility and different presence of concern. And so when you're in the startup mode, you might not have experienced that. You might not have grown to that yet. So it's important to take that time, to take that step back and say, hey, well, these guys must know something, right? It's working. It hasn't broke yet. You know, this other guy spent 10, 20 years here, whatever, you know, maybe I can learn something from this, and then kind of bring your expertise to the table.
But a lot of people, what I realized, especially in our community, is that a lot of people have talent but have no business sense, right? So you'll start a business around a talent, and it fails because you have no business sense whatsoever.
Absolutely.
Or your team.
Strategy.
Or you don't have a team. You want to own everything, and not understand what it is exactly that you're owning.
One of the great points that Harris made is that you're going to pay one way or another. And so what I learned over time is that it's like SWOT analysis, right? Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, right?
Yes.
But you got to apply that to all types of scenarios.
Right.
And if you really get into hierarchy of management, what you realize is that you're only doing this to figure out the weaknesses, right? And the threats. And so in order to once you do that, the question is, what do you do with it, right? And the smart people realize that they got to pay for it one way or another. So either I'm going to pay for it with education, which also accommodates time, right? Which is one thing that I'll never get back and I can't replicate, right? Or I'm just going to pay cash. And I could do that with me not getting educated and just running and burning. End up startup, we're familiar with that, right? Or I can do that by paying for experts.
Right.
And a lot of us feel sometimes that paying for experts is too far out of reach because they know more than us, right? We can't lead them. They're going to lead us. And so, again, trying to get that growth and that learning and that position behind you to feel comfortable leading organizations. I know that's what we want to do, to your point, but the idea is just the same way we need a janitor, we need a CEO, right?
Right.
But some people forget and, you know, try to forgive that moment in their lives where they were the janitor. but they don't realize that if the house isn't clean, we ain't doing no business, you know?
Right.
So it's important to understand these positions and give that importance and relevance. And so I think we have a unique position, unlike a lot of others who come into these business models where we should have that empathy, right? Quite naturally. Now, can we apply that forward, right? To say, hey, we've got the time to grow, because, you know, a highfalutin MBA might cost $75,000 right now. You know what I mean? Get you one of them in cool executive joints. You know, that's gonna, you know, hopefully tell you something smart and fast. You know, but still, there'll be guys who come into my organization right now and say, hey, you know, the things that we're learning aren't things that were in those books. You know, there aren't things that I paid for with that education. Now, there were some experiences and some inklings to you know, maybe some smoke. But you know, there was no fire.
So to that point,
it's the best teacher.
To that point, what's something that you guys have not learned in school, but really got out here in the real world that just like made a tremendous difference from just like going through the process of it?
What I do now?
Explain on that.
I mean, what we do now in the world of finance, we're in commerce. I didn't learn anything about commerce from elementary to, you know, Texas A&M. I didn't learn anything about commerce, of how it works, how it operates around the world. Didn't learn any of that. I learned that in life. I learned that way outside of school. So that none of the stuff that we know, I'm telling you what I'm telling you, or not in any of the books.
Oh no,
not any of the licensed material. Like you're not going to find any of this information in any of these books or anything like that.
There's a book. It's not available. Yeah, it's not available. It's in the back of a store that's just you don't have access to.
Beware of the pale white horse.
You following? And so it is a part of that. Mine's
the unedited version.
Mine's easier. You're darned if you do, darned if you don't.
Yeah,
you know. Right. So you know, from my standpoint, it goes in line with one of my mantras: striving for excellence while aiming for perfection. Right.
You'll land on it.
That's it. If we strive and aim, you know, wherever we land should be comfortable, right, or should be okay. And I just think people take that a little bit differently sometimes. You know, we can't be perfect, right? That's not a real thing to accomplish. But as long as we're trying to grow and breathe, you know, we're darned if we do, darned if we don't. You can't tell how it's going to work out.
I would say mine is when you're building a brand or an individual, or even the entity, employee relations is where it's at. The most valuable thing for me is relationships, right? And how you pour into someone, how you pour into the people that help make that engine grow and run. Man, I can tell you, I have conversations and people reach out to me from business I've done years ago just because I try to treat them square and fair, right?
Absolutely.
Now, there's been, you know, probably some folks that might be listening to this that are thinking, okay, I hear all these great things about trying to start this or try to go and acquire these different businesses. But where do I even get started on just getting into the deal flow of things? Like, how do I jump into this game? What do
they call you?
That's it. You can go to www.capitalassetadvisors.net.
Boom.
Here to help, right? Don't forget that wink and the gun happen.
Oh my goodness.
That's important. So there are some open-faced tools out there, right? And I always describe this to buyers even as they approach me, you know, to engage. Because I always want people to be aware of what types of options they have available to them. And so similar to like a, you know, online market for real estate, you know, Zillow, there is an online market for businesses just right under everybody's noses. And maybe, you know, depending on who you are, they might not be the size and value of businesses that you want. But for a lot of people, they cover. One of those largest sites in the States is bizbuysell.com.
Yes.
And so they offer a lot of good activity all the time. And I always applaud people to go kind of check that out, see the detail, and realize that it's not just some figment of our imagination, right? There are people listing businesses every day of the week. There's probably 20, 30,000 businesses a quarter listed, and to the tune of billions of dollars every year that changes hands. And so just seeing that visual sometimes gets you started on the mojo that there is something to it.
Right. Now, is there how would you go about it if somebody or a group of people wanted to try and get into this game to build their buying power into the space. What is your thoughts centered around that?
Well, I think that that's a common topic. A lot of times people are investing into what their industry is today, you know, not realizing what they could have. And so, you know, kind of like my mom told me, you know, they want to make it a side hustle just in regards of availability, space, and capacity in their lives. And so what I try to describe to people is we could all be private equity firms.
Right.
I mean, there's no difference between us and them but the strategy. So I help people format or participate or, you know, create those types of organizations where we can help them get to the goal from that.
It kind of sounds like group economic, cooperative.
Well, absolutely.
It's cooperative economics.
Economics. You know, however you want to.
We're going to make that a thing.
We
want to make that happen.
No, guess what? It's innate in us. It is a thing.
General partner, limited partner scenario, whatever you want to call it, special purpose vehicle. You know, there's a lot of varieties of how you can talk or, you know, terminology here. You know what I mean? But the idea is the same. You know, sometimes we don't have the space and grace or time capacity to kind of move into this place, and we feel like the stream of income we've got going is a good comfort zone. Now, not that I don't believe that comfort is the cousin of complacency. However, you know, in some positions, that's the right move for us, right? Like, hey, you know, if I'm in the league right now with an active contract, you know, I'm not going to shut it down, you know, to go move on this other move. What I want to do is duplicate or replicate or apply on top of.
There you go.
Is what I'm trying to translate to people is that, hey, you can do all the above. Now, there's a level for people who want to be hands-on and have that capacity and time to say, hey, I just want you to help me be a buyer rep and you help me go find what I'm needed. And then there's this other level where, hey, I don't have the time or the space or the grace. I need a team to help me with it. And then that's when we're talking those, you know, group economic type of scenarios. Hey, let's form this organization, SPV or whatever. We'll find the guys to run it or manage on the top side, and we'll go after that schema no matter what it is in the industry.
Okay, so with that, all that being said, you've named off a few things as far as where people can start, you know, getting into the deal flow. But what about when it comes to raising the capital? You've named a couple tools that are out there. What are some other things that people can do to position themselves to have the capital to make these acquisitions?
I guess have a good job. I don't know. No, I mean, savings, you know, friends and family, that's still a thing. If you read entrepreneur books, they're going to say that's a #1 strategy to capitalize any company in the world. And that's going to be
friends and family,
your friends and family, and your cash out your savings, right?
Do that.
So that's a piece of it. And that's why I offer, you know, hey, I feel a lot more comfortable with a tool that I may or may not be able to use, which is that retirement, right, as a vehicle. Knowing that, you know, how they cap people off in pensions or, you know, trying to get people out of business early works, you know, that $1 million really isn't going to be enough.
Are there any credit options?
Absolutely. There's always debt, but I think that's a part of it. With being able to leverage a business, you want to use debt, right? However, you got to bring some equity to the table. So you got to get that cash from somewhere. Some people, I dealt with a couple last year that bought a whole organization, 100% cash out of pocket, and they used a HELOC, right? They leveraged their home equity line of credit to cover the rest of the cash. And now this lady who worked 18 years in marketing in the corporate world has now just left and owns a business 2 minutes from her house in the same neighborhood that's a marketing firm that now they 100% own, and all the returns are coming back to them. So it just really depends. Ultimately, you got to find that equity portion of it, right?
Right.
And that's where maybe that group economics comes in. Maybe you need to pull up a couple guys or a couple ladies or gals to kind of come together and say, hey, here's our 100,000. Now let's figure out who's going to go run it and make that money for us, right?
Yeah. See, but what I found so far now is I don't believe that all too often we talk about our position or our people as if we're in the position of just always in the starter mode, to where we in the lack, but we are making money nowadays. We may not make him, you know, banker money, but we got folks that are making money.
That's a trick.
So,
you know,
so valid, right?
Yeah.
So we kind of talk to one side there of how people use acquisition to create an investment strategy, to change their format on liquidity.
Right.
However, as I mentioned before, the #1 tool to growth as as a business entity is acquisition. So why create, when you can acquire?
Right.
Why build when you can buy? So instead of creating another territory or building another branch office, they just knock out a whole, company in that area, right?
Right.
And
because
a good example.
The unseen monster is time with that.
Well, a good answer.
You cannot get it back.
Example would be D.R. Horton, right? How they became America's greatest builder was they started locally with their assets and activities, but as they grew and gained the strength of cash flows here, they acquired businesses, developers in every other area to expand and eventually acquiesce that brand into D.R. Horton. So instead of, one big thing trying to expand out and grab these customer bases, create all this, which is like starting up your company over and over.
Exactly.
People just don't realize it. It's like a new startup inside an operation that's already going.
Right.
Well, instead of doing that, acquisition is, again, another strategy.
Right.
How do we form bigger organizations? How do we go broader? How do we catch other territories that we haven't been able to insert ourselves in? How do we get better market share? How do we get better markets? Right.
We have to partner with each other, man.
Right. Now, for those that are listening, I'm gonna give you. For those that there's some people that still have this itch to start from scratch, right? Yeah. But if you do have that itch to do that, there's still a way to put acquisition webbing in there to where you're still mitigating the risk in it. So, for instance, let's say that you might want to be a chef, right? And you want to start.
We got a lot of chefs.
Yeah, we got a lot of chefs, right? So. How does this apply for somebody that might be a chef? Well, you might want to start your own thing versus acquiring something because you don't like what's sitting out there. Well, a great way to go about utilizing what Xavier's talking about is saying, you know what?
Purchasing your supplies from.
Well,
that may be the acquisition piece within this puzzle.
That might be the acquisition, right? So you might look at, like you're saying, okay, let me look down my supply line. Or you need to have your restaurant there somewhere, right? So it's going to be some real estate that's going to be involved.
There you go.
So you might say, you know what? I'm going to acquire a commercial area that has cash flow in it, and then I put my restaurant inside of there. So now I'm not just trying to hustle to make a plate so I can pay rent up in there.
Right.
And because restaurants, I mean, they come and go. I know from being in the food business that it is a very tough industry to be in. But if you go out and you acquire the cash flow, the risk of having to be in the position of having to make at least your rent to keep doors open, now you still got to pay your staff and all that, but you're helping mitigate the risk at least at some point.
Well, I think sometimes going after the real estate in that fashion is good, but it's probably going to be more fruitful return-wise to just go after another business in the vertical. To Harris's point, the idea that most times as you grow organizations, even if you were looking at VC dollars or investment capital in your organization, most guys in the bigger standpoint of the stack would like you to have acquisition as a part of it, just to strengthen the investment, right?
But that's the major part of that piece. Is because that there are assets that are there because from a investor or banker standpoint,
that is what
I'm looking to see. Okay, is there some collateral there? If all goes wrong, I have the ability to still get my money back.
So it makes it a lot harder to say go get that startup capital to create that first restaurant. Not that I'm saying you shouldn't do it. You shouldn't. We should buy one instead. But even if you wanted to, because you wanted to create some unique concept, the idea would be if you already had a cash flowing operation that you owned, then you got leverage to actually make that happen at an available pace that will capitalize to the needs that you have.
Right.
Most times the problem is that we get undercapitalized, right? We don't have the type of credit or the leverage or the collateral to get fully what we need because we're going after the riskiest strategy.
See, but that information isn't out there, right? Unless people are talking to you, because in our community, unless they're talking to you, they're not going to get that information like that.
And see, the part of what you're talking about here, and for both of y'all, I think the point is a lot of times we talk about how there's this huge wealth gap and then there's an access to capital gap. But the information gap is so wide, right? Because we're not utilizing the right strategies, and that becomes a huge problem. And that in turn, we're constantly saying, "Oh, we're being blocked out," when in actuality, what's blocking you out is the strategy on doing it, because what we've learned in the commerce space is that it's really about money. Money loves following money.
Yes.
That's
period.
It. Period. Right?
Well, I break it down to mutually beneficial, right? Now, there's an ex-president that we won't like to use the terms, quid pro quo, right? That in each deal to make a transaction go down, it's got to be mutually beneficial to all the parties, right? And so that's why the money follows money, because if it works for both of us and the outcome's income, then we ain't got no problems, right? We can work with anybody.
Right.
And so that's the same kind of transaction that's available in M&A or acquisition or otherwise, that if you understand the strategy, that it's no problem. You don't have this far-fetched subset of where to go, right?
Right.
And I think that a lot of us as, minority kind of strategists in building brands, we have that flaw all the time. Hey, they're not giving money to our guys. I got to go to Atlanta for this. I got to go to Miami for this, or something like that. And I learned a long time ago, you can make money from anywhere.
Right.
You got to go nowhere.
Right.
You go, there's cats in their basement right now killing it. Right. Like, don't even leave, kind of thing. So it's really not that. It goes back to that strategy. When do we find access to it? And that's why On the Money podcast is available.
Man, that's a great segue. So we actually, every time we have these shows, man, it feels like we just don't have enough time to keep diving into more stuff. But before we get up out of here, I want to get from my two co-hosts over there, what are a couple things you want to leave folks off with? And then Xavier, I'll let you get some of the last words and tell folks how they can find you and all that kind of good stuff with it. But I'll start with you, BJ, Bethel Johnson, B. Dot. What are some things that you think that folks need to leave off with after today's discussion?
Well, for one, find Xavier.
I appreciate that.
Because there's not. I mean, there's a lack of information, even about the stuff that you were talking about, right? With the Rob and everything. Like there's so much information out there that we're not even privy to, because again, these are closed doors conversations. Information is hoarded. But I would say find a business broker, acquire, and stop being in the startup mode. And to get out of that mode, you got to realize who you are.
Right.
For one, KRS-One said something a long time ago. He gave us an analogy of a slave plantation. He said there's three types of Negroes on a slave plantation. He said there's one that's like, oh yeah, it's cool, you know what I'm saying? Master good, And then there's the second one is like, hey, it's not that bad. We getting fed, we all right. It's not that bad. But then there's a third one that comes up and be like, have y'all ever heard of an MAP? They're trying to get off the plantation and find themselves off the plant. Yeah. They trying to get out of there. They're not trying to stay. They're not comfortable with that. And a lot of us got to find out who we are in our business. So if we're that third one, then we know we need to be looking to acquire, because those are your entrepreneurs. That's trying to find a way off the plantation. It's not comfortable to them. It's not in. Sure. They're not good with the setup or anything like that. So they want off. So those are the people. Once you know who you are, you identify who you are, then that's when you start tapping into resources like Xavier to help you find what you need in your vertical.
Right. Harris, what about you, man? What are some last thoughts that you think folks need to leave off with?
I always kind of like to bring it to the human aspect of it. The reality of just this conversation and how we have come together generally, like, look, we have to put our pride aside in order to go to the next level. The information is out there, right? Bethel just said something really important. He actually is a financial expert, and he didn't even know about or had heard about that. That tells you there are going to be some things that you have to be willing to accept to grow. And if you are not in the position mentally to accept those things, the reality of it is you won't grow. Mm-hmm. You will look back and think about the things that you wish you would have done, right? I remember sitting there and I made a decision. The decision was, I'm going to bet on me.
Right.
If I fail, I fail. Because guess what? This is the thing about being a husband. You have all the responsibilities and half of the benefits.
Oh, yeah.
if things are going well, it's you guys are great. If things are not going well, it's he ain't doing what he's supposed to do.
That's a nice way of putting it.
So I say all that to say to that person out there, right? I want to speak life into you. It is 100% okay. From someone who has started multiple companies and businesses, it's okay to start, right? But we got to get past starting. We have to put our best and brightest in position to help. So guess what? You have to be okay with partnering with someone that may be a leader or a veteran in that industry. And you also got to be okay with pulling somebody up. Because if you are in a position, you're not growing the person behind you, you're dying. Mm-hmm. Listening to Xavier just reaffirms my belief in my community, my people, and just us in general, right? We have to get out of the mindset of we need someone to validate our ideas. If the capital is what's holding you from moving forward, then you don't want to move forward. Because what he just said was, there are several strategies to go from A to Z. If you want to go fast, what?
Go alone.
Go alone.
But if you want to go far, what?
Go together.
Go together. Yeah, there it goes. So Xavier, I just want to tell you thank you so much for joining us today. Let the folks know how they can find you and all that fun jazz.
He already plugged it.
He plugged it a couple times. But I mean, and we're going to throw up the website and all that to make sure folks know.
That'll be there. Well, no, I just wanted to follow on to Harris. I felt like there was a bubble and a guy somewhere that was going to show up and be like, message. But to his point, I never want people to feel like, new information is a bad thing, right?
Yeah. Right.
Statistically, 85% of people who acquire businesses are first-time buyers,
Mm-hmm.
right? Even if they've been in business for decades, they're unaware that there's an opportunity for them to do something different.
Right.
And so it's not just, you or me or these guys here. This is just a thing, right? Like where the knowledge is just not openly available to us, or the way that we can see it or grasp it to say, hey, this is an option. So appreciate always having the opportunity to, share what's out there and what's available. Always hoping and happy to kind of build up and bring more of us to the table. Right. Of course, we're Arlington based, so you can always catch us right there in the great America's favorite city.
No, sir.
But capitalassetadvisors.net. Obviously, we're local. There's an 800 number, a local number. Any of the social media feeds, you can always catch up with us. Happy to always give a little bit of insight and work with people who want to work with us, right?
All right, cool. So everybody, we appreciate y'all listening. Please make sure that you like, share, subscribe, everything from there. We just want to continue to keep these conversations going. So please comment, get into the comments, and make sure that we're able to spread this out, spread this information, because we're really looking to get this moving forward. All right. So
hold on before you go. Again, we're not in the business of making money off of you.
Oh, no.
We're in the business of making money
with you.
No
We're
doubt.
showing you how to do that, because the only way we can succeed as an entire group is everybody's doing well.
Yeah.
Mutually beneficial.
Now,
it got to be.
I have to put this plug in here before we leave. Harris.
This guy, the On the Money merch.
On the Money merch is coming soon. If you have not been checking out the show, Harris has been quietly wearing some of our drip that's going to be coming out. But this brother is gifted in this area, and so we
I'm just a reflection of the people I'm with.
Yeah, man, there it goes.
This man stay drip like rain.
Stay dripping. Stay
I just want to have
like rain.
But we are the group of On the Money podcasts, and I appreciate y'all for listening. Hey, my man Spider, go ahead, bring us on out.
Take us out.
Yes, sir. So molded beat.